Привет, друзья! G'day guys, welcome to another Soviet lens review. Today, we're taking a look at a Soviet lens that almost no one has heard of. So, let's get into it. That's right guys, today we are taking a look at this. This is the Jupiter-39 or the Jupiter-39, and this is a Soviet 135mm f5.6 lens manufactured in the late 1980s and early 1990s in Soviet Belarus at Minsk Mechanical Plant. So already we're off to an interesting start, a lens at a plant that was not the most popular lens manufacturing plant in the Soviet Union. But what actually makes this lens special? Well, this lens was not actually a lens designed for consumer cameras. So you wouldn't have seen many Zenits back in the day with the Jupiter-39 on it. And that's part of what makes it so rare or, so uncommon today. And that's because this lens was originally designed to go on the Selena police camera, the same police camera or speed camera that the Jupiter-38, which I've already reviewed, was manufactured for. And that meant that this lens, it really did have a different set of objectives, a different set of goals from those standard consumer lenses. Whereas, consumer lenses, they wanted to have a bright, wide aperture, as bright as possible. You're photographing portraits or, kind of lifestyle things. This lens, it was made for one specific purpose, and that purpose was to set up in a speed station, to catch those speeding larders as they were going by, to snap a picture of their number plates under any conditions. And that design philosophy really impacts how this lens feels to use today and the pictures and videos that you can get out of it. Before that though, let's take a little bit more look at the lens's technical characteristics. So it does have an aperture that goes from f5 all the way down to f22. Has a basically 13 or so bladed aperture, which means that at all aperture ranges, it is really circular, really smooth. It is a clickless aperture. As well as that, this lens has an M42 filter thread, which you can mount to any modern mirrorless camera. I'm shooting today my Mir 24M on my Nikon Z6. That is what all of the photos in this review are shot on as well. And it has a minimum focusing distance of just 3 meters, which is actually pretty long for a 135mm lens. Really, that's because it wasn't really designed to be a lens that, there was not going to be a larder 1 meter away from the police station speeding or, something like that. So they didn't need this lens to have a very short minimum focusing distance. But that does mean that it can be a little bit tricky to focus. Outside of that, this lens is about 505 grams. It does have a 62mm filter thread, and you might note that the serial number of this lens is actually doesn't follow the standard serial number naming convention of having the first 2 digits as the year that it was produced. Mine is 1236. But yeah, I picked this lens up for a little bit over $200 US, and I'm very happy that I did. Now that we've talked about the technical characteristics, it's also worth mentioning that this lens does have a 4-element glass design in 3 groups, like all of the other sonars that you'll see that were made in the Soviet Union. So, you might think about the Jupiter-37A 135mm f3.5, and that's a good lens to kind of compare this to a little bit because it has some of those similar-ish sort of characteristics, but we'll get into those a little bit later. Ergonomically, the focus ring, it turns smoothly, but the knurl on my focus ring is not very sturdy. It's not rubber. It's not like a really deep kind of groove cut here. It's just really light, which feels smooth, but it's actually not the most pleasant experience because if you are not looking at the lens, it's kind of hard to feel what is focus ring and what is not. So that is my only kind of ergonomic critique about this lens. And of course, some people might not prefer the clickless aperture. Some people like it clicky. Now though, let's talk about optical characteristics of the photos that come out of this lens. How do they look? Well, first off, of course, let's dive into a sharpness test and see what came out of that. Alrighty guys, starting off at f5.6, I took some shots with my sharpness test chart here, and we can see that the Jupiter-39 at f5.6 has a lot of resolution in the center of the frame. Everything is looking pretty sharp, honestly. As we move out towards the corners, there is just the tiniest drop in resolution, but look, these are not bad corners by any stretch. As we stop down though to f8, we can see that things just sharpen up that tiny amount. The corners are a little bit sharper, the center has a little bit more contrast, and really that's where this lens stays, right through to about f22 when it does degrade heavily due to the effects of diffraction. Now, I put these images into a custom algorithm I wrote, similar to modern focus peaking algorithms, that spits out a sharpness value. And as you can see here, f5.6 or f8 is where you want to be shooting the Jupiter-39. You're not going to get much by stopping it down further than that. So overall, a really good showing in terms of sharpness here for the Jupiter-39. So there we go, guys. We can see that the Jupiter-39, it is a sharp lens. And outside of that, I have to say it is a very contrasty lens as well. It produces beautiful neutral colors. What I did is I took this lens down to photograph some tennis that we were playing. And I thought, well, that would be a great kind of example of trying to get some fast moving objects with this lens. That was kind of what it was originally designed for, to shoot fast moving objects. And I think that really helped me to see why the designers of this lens made some of the design choices that they did. Because of course, with an f5.6 lens, you really do have a lot more in your plane of focus. And so when you're trying to shoot a fast moving subject and when you're manual focusing, it is really a challenge. Again, I've been manual focusing for years, but trying to manual focus on a fast moving subject at say 3.5 on a Jupiter-37A, you're really going to struggle, and you're going to have more misses than hits. That is for certain. So really, it's a great lens ergonomically in some ways, because all you have to really do is just get it out, set it to f5.6, and then you forget about it. It just stays at f5.6 for the entire day of shooting, which is quite nice if you don't want to kind of fiddle around with apertures either. And that's what I found myself doing whilst taking these photos. Now, in terms of coating on this lens, it is definitely at least single coated. I have not been able to find any technical kind of documentation that says whether this lens is multi-coated or not. If I had to actually make a guess, it does look like a Soviet multi-coating. It is that kind of purple multi-coating. And because this lens was produced around the late 1980s and the early 1990s, that was when the Soviets, they were multi-coating a lot of lenses. So if I had to guess, I would say it is multi-coated, but if anyone knows for sure in the comments, please drop me a comment as well, and we can see if we can decide once and for all. Now, in terms of the weaknesses of this lens optically, well, it suffers some of the same weaknesses that any of the Jupiters do. In particular, the longitudinal chromatic aberration is an issue with this lens. So that is the color shifts in the near and far field out of focus areas. Basically, it's slightly colorful bokeh where it shouldn't be. So the green and the magenta tints, you do get that a little bit with this, but honestly, I've never really had it to a point where I've found it an issue in any of the photos that I'm taking, because this is an f5.6 lens. You're not actually going to get that much bokeh. It does also display a little bit of fringing on high contrast edges, like a stick in front of the sky, for instance. But yeah, that's about it. But the really impressive thing about this Jupiter-39 is its resistance to backlight. And that is really what guided so many, I think, of the design choices of this lens. This is one of the most resistant to backlight Soviet lenses that I own. You can shoot it up against a backlight, and yes, you will see a little spot of flare, but overall, it is going to hold contrast, it is going to hold sharpness, and the lens is going to hold together, which is, so often what you find lacking in a lot of these old Soviet designs. So a real few points there, a real bit of credit there to the designers of this lens. But there you go, guys. Look, I love shooting this lens, whether it's for photos or for videos. For videos, this is a really nice lens as well, of course, because of that beautiful bokeh throughout the aperture range. And it is just a good size also. So if you are looking for something a little bit interesting, a little bit unique, a lens that not many people have used before, but still holds its own, then I would highly recommend the Jupiter-39. You can pick it up if you spot a deal for a very reasonable price, just like I did. But guys, let me know, have you ever used the Jupiter-39? Would you consider picking one up? Let me know down in the comments below. And of course, thank you very much for 2,000 subscribers that we hit recently. But until the next time, guys, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you then.